The Ruins by Scott Smith. So, on the cover of this book, there is a quote by Stephen King calling this the best horror novel of the new century. Now, I have learned through much hard experience not to take the word of Stephen King when it comes to the quality of the books he praises, because I don't know whether the man is just drunk on his own celebrity and likes to see his name appearing on other people's books, but he will blurb anything. He will praise books that are not worthy of praise. And I have been burned more than once by reading books based on his recommendations. And I generally tend not to do that anymore. However, this time, I actually agree with Stephen King. The Ruins is a knockout of a horror novel. It is eco horror at its finest. And to rate The Ruins right now, I would actually give this an A minus. I would truly award it that high of a rating because this book was awesome. So The Ruins was published in 2006, I believe. It was the second novel of Scott Smith, and I think remains his second novel to date. Scott Smith, his previous book was the crime thriller called A Simple Plan, which was adapted into a pretty highly acclaimed film, I think, by Sam Raimi. Haven't seen that, haven't read it. But this was his second book, and it was a switch from crime to horror. And boy, did he take to that like a duck to water. This book was actually scary at times, and it was always thrilling. And I had a great time reading The Ruins. So, what is The Ruins about? What is the story? If you haven't seen the movie, I have years and years ago. It had to be like over 10 years ago that I saw that movie. Don't remember anything about it other than the premise. So I was pretty blind going into this. But if you haven't seen the movie, the story of The Ruins is that there are four young American college collegiate kids. They're early 20s and they're still in their college years. I think they're about to be starting their lives and careers, but they are on vacation in Mexico, in Cancun. Their names are Jeff, Amy, Eric, and Stacy. They're couples. And they're just, having a high old time in Cancun like you do. But then they meet this guy named Matthias, a German guy, and he says, my brother has run off with this archaeologist chick to explore these Mayan ruins that are, about a day's drive away. I need you to come help me look for him. And so they're like, sure, we'll help you find your brother. So they go deep into the Mexican jungle and they find the ruins, a hill covered in vines. And after they set foot on the hill, the Mayans keep them there. They prevent them from leaving and they surround the hill and they arm themselves. No one's getting off this hill. The only thing on this hill other than them is just a bunch of vines, a flowering vine, kind of like kudzu, I guess. And they're stuck on this hill. But little do they know they are not alone because, as it so turns out, that vine is sentient and it is evil as crap. And it is a carnivorous plant, not unlike a Venus flytrap or a pitcher plant. And it can do some crazy stuff, including move and talk. And so what ensues is a dismal story of survival, a rather unsuccessful story of survival in the Mexican heat as they are being preyed upon by a killer plant. And that's all I really want to say in terms of the plot because I was surprised at how this book turned out. When I went into it, I was trying to ascertain which character was going to be the final character or the final girl. Like in horror movies, I was like, who's going to be the one to survive? And again, not going to spoil anything, but I was really shocked at how that turned out. Again, I don't remember anything about the movie other than the vines were evil. Uh, and I'm glad that I didn't because it made this book hit all that much harder. And the effect here was just really fantastic. So uh, I respect this book a lot because it was able to craft a very intense atmosphere out of a rather odd premise, and it was able to give us a very unique and somewhat original monster. I guess this isn't really the first time that we've seen killer plants. I mean, Little Shop of Horrors, I guess that kind of qualifies, but you don't see that very much. Usually in horror books, the monster is like a vampire or a werewolf or a ghost or a serial killer or something. You don't really see killer vines, killer plants all that much. But this book got a lot of mileage out of its villain, out of its monster. And I can really say that it was actually kind of scary at parts. Now, I want to say this book had a really slow build up. This book did not hit the ground running. In fact, it took over 100 pages for this thing to really get going and for it to even become apparent what the real threat is here, um, what the actual situation is. But once it did not let up, and it was able to foment a an atmosphere of such dread and apprehension that it's really just a nail biting affair. And it's grisly as all get out. I don't gore in horror novels. It can go either way. It can be a really effective tool to, heighten the sense of terror, or it can just be something schlocky that an author resorts to when they don't really have the capacity to elicit genuine fear. It is the former with the ruins. The gore here is pretty intense. There are some really kind of stomach churning scenes in this involving some impromptu medical procedures and attempted medical procedures, but it's not cheap. It is very well earned, and it serves to add to the fear, not just try to replace the lack thereof. It's a really well put together book, and the characters in this book are pretty good. Now, I will say first of all, the names of these characters are the most vanilla, generic names ever. Jeff, Amy, Stacy, Eric. I mean, they're just the most vanilla names ever, and it really took me a while for me to even really be able to tell these people apart. Again, it starts so slowly. There's like there's such a build up to the true beginning of the horror. And the characters did not come alive immediately. It took some time for me to really be able to really distinguish these characters apart. But once I could, I really did get invested. These were well crafted characters. My biggest complaint here, and perhaps the only real complaint against the book, is that there isn't much backstory. The characters have very distinct, separate personalities. Like some of them are kind of weak and insecure, and then others are more like forceful and very proactive. And everybody has a distinct personality that you can really pick up on, but there's not much backstory to any of them. There's only like one or two times where the book delves into something of the character's life that transpired before the start of the book. And I thought that was a weakness. I thought there could have been more elaborated upon regarding who these people were, where they come from. It was like there really wasn't anything. It was just like we don't know anything about these people prior to the beginning of this book, and I think there could have been more in that area. Now, as for the writing of the ruins, it was pretty strong, if a little bit bland. It's not. For. He's not going for a grand kind of wow, look at this stunning kind of prose. It's not like it's not a very high level diction or anything like that. It's much more just kind of standard level vocabulary standard descriptions, but it's very, very solid, and he gives a great deal of detail, and he helps to really flesh out the characters he's painting, as well as paint the physical environment they're inhabiting, and it really worked well enough. It was never inept or clumsy or anything. It was very, very solidly done, if just kind of unremarkable and plain a little bit, but definitely not weak. So this is definitely a well written book. And the themes of this book, obviously, survival is a big one, but it's as with some of the best stories of this scenario. It involves an external threat. In this case, the vines, but it also shows how the people kind of turn on each other in their isolation, and so you get a really nice human dynamic to it, which is which really serves to round out the experience quite well. And dang, were the vines in this book scary. You don't really think of plants being all that scary because most of the time they're not. But the vines in this book were really, really scary because they can do so much, and you know that they can think and he constantly teases out more and more abilities of what these plants can do. They can move, they can attack people. They can digest their bodies in a very short amount of time, but they can also mimic speech and sounds and smells. And they're also decidedly malevolent. They are genuinely evil. And there's never any explanation given as to why any of this is happening or what these vines even are. All we know is that there are some vines growing on this hill, and the Mayans are keeping the vines there because they've salted the earth around the hill so they cannot escape. And anyone that touches the hill, that brushes against the vines, has to be quarantined there and will inevitably die. And again, it's kind of a simple premise, but Scott Smith really did get a lot of miles out of it, and it was really a slow burning affair that really packed a wallop, really. And I cared about the characters. The writing was solid. It was good. Maybe not the most remarkable, but definitely good, and it served the story well. It really was a well told story, and it surprised me because again, I did not see the ending coming. I thought it would have ended differently, and it really was kind of ballsy in the way that it wrapped up, and how it was kind of determined not to conform to your expectations, or at least not to mine. And he also does not play by some of the rules. Like, you think things are going to unfold one way, but he shows you that no character is really safe at all. And it's grisly eco horror done to the finest, I think, because this book was really just a great experience, and it's one of the finest horror novels I have read in quite some time. This was really refreshing to me because I'm such a big fan of horror. I guess that would probably be actually like my favorite genre when it's done right. And it had been a while since I've read a horror novel this well done, and I think this definitely does merit an A minus rating for me because it did pretty much everything I wanted it to do. It was kind of it was very intimate. There's some kind of disgusting scenes in here, but it just was a very well put together story, and I can definitely appreciate that. And dang, did it have me on the edge of my seat reading it. So yeah, The Ruins by Scott Smith. Have you read The Ruins? If you have, or have you seen the movie? If you have, let me know down in the comments what you thought about it, whether you have agreed or disagreed with anything I've said about it here today. If you haven't read The Ruins, this is a hard recommend for me. If you are a fan of horror, if you are a fan of kind of unique horror that doesn't rely on the typical boogeyman that so many horror novels do, if you'd like something a little bit more unique, definitely give this one a look because it'll keep you on your toes, and it's kind of a chiller, really. I liked it. It's definitely it's dreadful in its atmosphere, and it really does have an effect on you, or at least it did on me. So I could definitely recommend it. And as always, if you have enjoyed anything you've seen or heard here today, remember to like, subscribe, help the channel out a little bit. I would greatly appreciate it. And until next time, peace.